Coming to you from the Oddball Podcast Studios in New York City. My name is Vin Forte, and you're listening to Oddball with Vin Forte. Go follow the show over on YouTube, youtube.com/@OddballPodcast. And if you just want to listen to it the old-fashioned way, go ahead and do that over on Spotify, Apple. I keep wanting to say Stitcher, but they went bankrupt last summer, so don't go to Stitcher. There's a million other places you can get podcasts from, so go to those places. Google Play, Deezer, is that a place people get podcasts? I don't know. You know where to get podcasts from because you're listening to one right now. So, yeah, do that. But again, the big one is YouTube. If you want to follow on social media, though, to get all the updates, Instagram first and foremost at oddball_pod over there, and at Oddball Podcast over on Twitter, not Twitch. Don't go to Twitch. There's no Twitch channel. But got a big guest this week. One of my favorites. I specifically wanted him on this week because I know he's I don't want to embarrass him by saying a casual fan of the NBA, but he's more fan of the NFL, and he's the perfect person to gauge the discussion on the All-Star weekend. So I'm very cognizant of that. He's one of my favorite podcasters. He's someone that came along a couple of years ago on a different podcast, and really just took to it. Had not really done podcasting before, and then branched out. He does Banks versus Davis with the aforementioned Banks, who has been on this pod before. So as you can surmise, the only person left would be Davis.
Hey, how's it going?
You
know what's funny because
cool son of a bitch with your sunglasses on at night.
I always had to do that always became my trademark after a while. I mean, I always wear sunglasses in general, even when it's cloudy and foggy and dark outside. It's always been my thing. But I guess, I mean, the Jack Nicholson approach kind of is what I became known for, wearing sunglasses indoors, or the Bono look. But yeah, but no, it's funny that you say like Stitcher and Deezer. Like, I didn't know the Stitcher thing, but yeah, like it's always just Apple and Spotify. I don't think anything's replaced those. Like Threads exist, but we still go to Twitter or X. Like, the alternatives aren't alternatives at the end of the day. So it's funny that you had to say Stitcher doesn't exist. I'm like, I had no idea, because when you listen to podcasts, people always try to plug every outlet because you never know what people listen to. I'm one of the people who listens to podcasts on Spotify, but I have Apple Music, and I listen to music on Apple Music. I'm one of those people, but I don't pay for Spotify. So
yeah, it's very, it is weird because I know there are some people out there where every once in a while see the analytics, and they'll be like, oh, one person from Argentina listened via Google Book Reader, or it's like, what?
And it's weird
shenanigans going on.
Again, mainly it's YouTube, and again, you're right to plug that because that's what we're mainly on. Banks versus Davis is YouTube these days. We used to do Apple and Spotify in the past, but yeah, but YouTube is where all podcasting is basically. But yeah, you say casual fan of the NBA. I used to love the NBA more than kind of anything else really for a long period of time, mainly in my teen years. But I kind of fell off in the last 7 years in terms of knowing what's happening kind of team by team in a way. And it wasn't due to the boredom of parody or all the teams looking the same or trying to be the same, with the free agency running wild or the everyone wants to shoot threes. It was on that. I kind of fell off and started paying attention more to other things, but I still love basketball. I mean, basketball now it's in a weird spot, but everything has a weird spot for a while. So it'll be interesting to talk about All-Star Weekend specifically, which I never really cared about because I didn't have cable to really check out All-Star Weekend like that when I was growing up.
Really? Well, let's just get right into it then. Yeah, All-Star Weekend was this past weekend. We'll get to some of the big highlights in a bit, but the actual game itself, the East won by 211 points, which is the highest point total ever for a winning team in an All-Star game. And a lot of people will hear that and probably went, yikes, because, yeah, you talk about no defense. Like, that is pretty much, like, because I wanted to make the argument going into this weekend that, okay, maybe they'll play light defense, but it's like, you know what? It's a showcase. Like, we're there to have fun, blah, blah, blah. But it's like when you're breaking scoring records in an all-star game, it becomes pretty undeniable that something's up with the defense, that nobody's playing. Even when they were announcing the player, when they were doing the introductions, it was like these guys just don't want to be there. And I don't know what you do to sort of, outside of paying them, although it's not like the in-season tournament where they're all fighting to get, the younger guys or the guy on the end of the bench a big paycheck, like we're doing it for our brothers. Like, this is just, you're already all-stars. You're already multi millionaires. Like, what could you possibly do to incentivize these guys even further to play hard? They said before the game, what was it, like Larry Bird, Dr. J, like they had all these people. Adam Silver came into the locker room to basically extol the virtue of, like, okay, guys, like, listen, we got a big TV contract coming up next year. We got to do it. We got to win one for the Gipper here. We got to, like, go out there and really put forth an effort. Come on, just give me one game. Give me one quarter. Give me the fourth quarter, guys. Let's go. 1, 2, 3, 2, and then they do what they do every year.
I think it's in a tough spot because I think you're right about the in-season tournament. I think guys stepped it up more for that because it was new. And there was kind of like I think some bragging rights to who's the first team that's going to actually win this thing. And you can tell, like, the way some teams took it seriously with fouling guys at the end of the game for the point differential, because that was the funky aspect of it, was if you were locked in with another team, you had to have the point differential to win. So with this, aside from paying the players again, like you brought up, but I think the losers should have to pay the winners out of their own money, like not money that's set aside for the All-Star game. Like they have to create a set amount, and the losers have to pay the winners. I think that will add some of that bragging rights, game to 21 pickup court lifestyle that they talk about, because they always say, like, they take the summer run seriously when all these guys go to the same trainers in the summer, and the pickup games are intense.
Like,
I think
like, we're not asking you to play like even a regular game, but when you bring up a great point. When we see these guys in the Drew League in the middle of August, it's like they're playing hard enough. Like, play, give us.
What's
give
different
us
with that
energy.
is that they have non-NBA guys in those games, and those guys take it to the NBA guys a lot harder, which is why, like, Frank Nitti, he exposed Denzel Valentine, and, like, Denzel Valentine was never the same after that. And that was the whole thing. Like, can Frank Nitti even play in the NBA? Well, he didn't end up playing in the Big Three, but it's like, unless you come up with something to make these guys, like, really fight for something, I think the way they try to do it, where the guys pick their own teammates, made sense, but make it just teams of 6 face each other, and you have it like that. Like, you still have the East and West spots, but break it down into the starters have their own team and the reserves have their own teams, and those teams each have an alternate, like a 6-man, and you don't have to play, to 50 or anything. You have games to 21, and it's round robin. You try to treat it like that, make it really competitive. Because that, you're saying, to get to 211 is very, very outrageous.
It is outrageous. It definitely stands out. But I've heard a couple people bring up the idea of maybe you do sort of a one-on-one thing where you have your starting. You wouldn't do that, where it's like you got a starting 5 and you do, like, okay, I'm calling out this person.
You want to see Jalen Brunson take on Giannis?
20. You know what?
Maybe you want to see it, but then when it's 11
when you
6,
actually see it, it's like, nah.
Yeah. Again, they got mad at Sabrina and stuff, and we'll talk to that. But that was much more even keeled. It was much more even than people try to say it was. But again, these guys, they don't. I'm not mad that they don't try hard at the All-Star game, because again, the last thing these guys want to do is get injured at the All-Star game, or it can't be the 80s, it can't be the 90s, it can't even be the early 2000s when for some reason those guys tried harder.
It can't be that period also, because I think we've also forgotten what the All-Star game used to mean, which is in the 80s and 90s, when most people still didn't have cable and you had, you know, your local games, or then you maybe your one national game a week that you got to watch. It was a big deal when February came around, and it was like, oh my god, all the stars in one place in a single game. That's incredible.
It's the only time I'm going to see Tom Chambers. You know, it's the only time I'm going to see, you know, Charles Barkley if I live in California. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but like now, it's like we have access to everything. We're seeing these guys highlights morning, noon, and night on Instagram and on, you know, wherever you can get any NBA coverage. There's this whole apps and channels dedicated to highlights. Like it's not special anymore. Like I do wonder if you showed this All-Star game from this past weekend to someone in the 80s, just sight unseen, we're like, hey, listen, I'm from the future. Here are the stars, and here's the All-Star game. Would they be disappointed that there was no defense, or would they be astounded that these guys can put up 211 points? And they would just sort of be like really excited that, like, oh my god, I'm seeing all these guys together, and they're just going off.
Honestly, I think a bit of both, to be honest. Not to be, because I'm always got to hear both sides to an extent, but I think they'd realize, wow, it's crazy, scored that many points, but then they'd be like, so how do they play defense, or do they not play defense? It'd be a little bit of both of like, wow, these guys can shoot. I think they'd be amazed that guys can shoot better now than the guys back then could, and just how the physical ability of a lot of these guys. Again, a lot of guys in the 80s weren't in the shape that a lot of the guys today are. I mean, when there was a guy who's not in shape in the NBA, it's the biggest story in the NBA, versus back then, if a guy was in shape, it was the biggest story in the NBA. Like, this guy takes fitness seriously. Like, look at him. Like, right. What a lunatic. So I think it would be something like that, where they'd be amazed that defense is so laxed, but guys can score. I mean, even in those 80s and 90s All-Star games, they still got to 120, 130s. They still, you know, they played defense. Yeah. They, like, again, the whole thing is they picked up defense. If the game was tight, they picked up defense, because at the end of the day, they still wanted those bragging rights. And that's what I mean. I know this year, I think they probably did the last few years, they kind of gave away of the East versus, well, not the East, the world versus the U.S. young guys. And this year they did like the four teams, and one of the team was purely the G League guys, and I think that works again. Like, those guys have something to prove against guys that actually play in the NBA. So if the reserves feel spurned, again, if Jalen Brunson's like, I should have started over Dame Lillard, I'm going to try harder when it's reserves versus starters.
Again, like I feel like all of these conversations, they wrap around to the same thing, where it's like, I hear what you're saying, but nobody knows, like, how do you get these guys to just play harder? Like, you know, we could say all we want, like, oh, we should do this. You know, maybe there's got to be a young guy that, you know, has something to prove that pushes everyone else to play harder. It's like, when you're getting that much money, and someone brought up it was Chris Broussard this week, brought up a very good point that I don't think a lot of people have even considered, that the whole All-Star weekend, I don't know what it was like in the 80s and 90s, but certainly now more than ever, it's basically the NBA's time to get all their corporate deals in check.
Yeah, it's
so
an
all
expo.
These guys are meeting with, it's an expo. So all these guys, like, during the day on the weekend, you know, they call it a vacation, but it's like, really, they're doing deals with their sponsors. They're meeting with corporate executives. Like, they're doing this and that. And then by the time the game comes around at night, like, this year they all look beat. They all look like they wanted to go to bed and take a nap. Like, they didn't want to play a game.
And that's when you got to put the game first and then do all the bullshit after. Like,
yeah, like, this may be stupid, but, like, I do wonder if they did the game on Friday night, because there's just something about it being on a Sunday night that I never really liked. You know what I mean? Where it's like, Sunday's a lazy day to begin with, and now it's like, I'm getting ready for work. I'm tired. Like, I feel that way. How must these guys? How must these guys feel? And if you play it on a Friday night, I feel like there's just a little more energy. You're going into the weekend instead of coming out of the weekend.
Yeah. It's the NBA's night anyway, compared to Sunday night, which is football's night. And that's the only reason they they realistically do it on a Sunday night is not just the festivities before it, but football is done by the time it's All-Star weekend. You don't have to worry about a game taking the big primetime slot. You are the primetime slot now, but the NBA runs Friday nights. They always run Friday nights. So if you were just to flop it like that, I think there would be and cut the break shorter where there's no games after that Sunday, and they have the Monday through Thursday to practice and again take it, like we're gonna play Friday, everyone's talking, not just drag out the media cycle of like this and that, and then Saturday and Sunday it's still celebrity game and the skills challenge stuff. Because people are still going to tune into that stuff. Yeah.
And speaking of that, the highlight of the weekend was the 3-point contest between Steph and Sabrina Ionescu of the WNBA, New York Liberty. And it's no wonder because, and I think they should do more stuff like this on All-Star Weekend, it was a very well-defined story that people wanted to see play out. She had put this contest out there, this challenge out there the past couple of years to Steph because she wanted to test herself, and it finally happened this year. And I think you could say the best outcome may have been if she had actually won, but outside of her actually winning, I think this was probably the best outcome that could have happened because one, she shot from the NBA line. She challenged herself in that way. It wasn't the WNBA line. Steph got 29 points, so he won, but she got 26 points, and he got his money ball. So, he had to catch up to her, and she had enough points that she would have won the regular 3-point contest that had happened right before their thing. So she
or at least would have been in the opening. She would have won the opening round.
All tied. Yeah, she would have won the opening round. But, I think she comes out looking great. I think Steph comes out looking great. He's still the best shooter in the world. She showed that she can hang with the NBA guys. It wasn't any kind of blowout. And I like that the WNBA is in a place right now where when people were talking about this specific event, a lot of the comments were hyping up Ionescu, and they weren't like, oh, well, what is she doing here? Or, oh, you see, she can't hang with Steph. Those comments were kind of getting shut down, except for Kenny Smith on commentary, who had some weird quibble about the 3-point line. And, oh, she should have shot from the women's line. It's like, shut up, Kenny. He also had some weird things to say about the dunk contest, but it's a whole other thing. Side note, let's just get rid of the dunk contest. There's I don't think we need to have a whole discussion about that. Just get rid of it. But do more stuff like this, where you properly identify interesting storylines going on around the NBA world and be like, can we turn that into an event or a thing on All-Star Weekend?
Yeah, because what she was doing, again, was putting her on the map, even though she already is in the WNBA, but on a global scale, again, to be in the finals, that would have been the 3-point contest. And then to come just 3 points short of tying him to force sudden death. I mean, that was impressive. I had suggested that they should have swapped the others' balls for one rack. He should have shot with the women's, because I know that their texture is different, and people thought that probably would have been a lot more easier for him. But I'm it would have added that level of difficulty because again, it is supposed to kind of be zany in a way where they each have a money ball, they each have the others, normal type of ball. How she can sink that, no problem. Can he sink that? We'll see. That kind of level of intrigue. But yeah, no, for her to shoot from the men's super line, again, it's not a shocking thing when you see what Caitlin Clark does in the college game, and she'll be someone who they can run this back when she's a pro. Again, I think this is something that they should keep in mind because it was a bigger deal than the regular 3-point contest, in my opinion, and than anything else that happened on Saturday night, because the dunk contest, it shouldn't count that you bring up G League guys to represent a team that they're not officially on. So it already kind of does away with the
and back-to-back
of it.
And having a G Leaguer be the back-to-back winner feels weird.
And that's not dissing the G League because guys kill it down there, and they work on it. But just in terms of it's the NBA dunk contest. The G League has their own showcase and their own dunk contest. Mac McClung, again, they had to bring in a guy who's gonna steal the show because again, like his dunks are good, but everyone else's dunks are that bad that he kind of wins by default. And that's the only thing that pisses me off is that he gets away with winning because he's the only one who actually can put some effort into it versus these guys who just either can't do it or their ideas are that bad. Like all of Jaylen Brown's ideas were just horrendous.
Yeah, less said about Jaylen Brown's. Oh man, I don't know what he was thinking. The thing with the shoes and I don't. It was bad. The LED court did not help at all because I couldn't see what was going on.
No, I like that. I think that worked for just in terms of like they are trying to experiment with technology. Well, they are trying to experiment with technology. They tried to sell us on the way you can watch the NBA like Spider-Verse, where the players will be animated and it will be this new way to look at the game. It's like that's I don't think what the point of trying to hook us in. Like yeah,
yeah, that technology is not there yet. If we even want,
yeah.
Yeah, I don't need to see. I saw the footage of Tyrese Halliburton doing the spider sense and like
it's just
around.
How are you gonna?
How you gonna do that? I'm
amazed. That's what I'm amazed that they can do it for the football games, the ones that they broadcast on Nickelodeon, where they'll have the correspondents who represent the anime characters wear, the CGI suits and get-ups to be animated when it's their time to be shown on screen. So I'm kind of amazed that they can do it like that. But I think the NBA trying to take it a huger leap. Huger is not even a word, but a bigger leap to try no, the game will be completely animated. It's like, yeah. I mean, you gotta. But the court, I think, is a cool wrinkle because it's something new, something fresh. Again, you don't want to do it in a full game, in a real game. You want to do it in something like this, and again, to add a level of flashiness that is kind of supposed to represent All-Star Weekend away. Again, the spectacle of it, not just the random Tuesday you go and see the Bucks versus the Heat.
Yeah,
I mean the courts this year for the in-season tournament were ridiculous. We didn't need to go to that level, but all their ideas they're shooting for the stars, and maybe Adam Silver knows not that his time's up, but I gotta do something to keep it going because, like you're saying, people are complaining about the game and players playing but then not playing.
I think he's been a very weak commissioner. I think that,
but it's only as of late.
It's only as of late. But he was also, and I guess there's got to be a right way to say this delicately, but he was kind of handed a layup when he came in with the Donald Sterling situation. Because as awful as that situation was, and obviously, if it could have never happened at all, and he could have never owned a team to begin with, great. But hindsight 2020,
I think David Stern
easy
let
call
this guy
for
in.
Commissioner.
So.
It's right to me that David Stern let this guy in. But for Adam Silver as a commissioner,
because David Stern, if you had money, David Stern was going to let you in, but he was going to rule like a tyrant no matter what. I think people got used to David Stern being the tyrant, that anyone who wasn't a tyrant, they kind of look at it oh, again, he doesn't have that dog in him. Whatever they want to say about him. So it's well, David Stern was the guy who said, guys shouldn't do this, guys shouldn't do that, and blah, blah, blah. And
he definitely had flaws in a different way. He definitely had big flaws in a different way. But I'm just saying, people loved Adam Silver at the start because he had that hard ruling about the Clippers and Donald Sterling. And it's to me, that was a layup because it's oh, great, I could be the hard commissioner and do the right call at the same time. But then
ask Roger Goodell about layups.
Well, Goodell's listen, there's not a lot of great commissioners in sports.
Yeah. They say this guy deflated the footballs, but I don't know. Maybe he did. I don't.
Yeah, no, it's not like we had evidence or text messages.
You know what? You know what? He didn't deflate them, and I'm going to say he did. And that's being a commissioner is hard. But the point, like you're saying, is they're all trying to secure these sports rights, and the NBA is in a worse spot than the NFL because the NFL is king, and they're going to have sports rights for as long as they're around. But the NBA is in a weird spot where I don't pay attention to ratings of the NBA. Again, it gets overblown. Wrestling ratings get overblown. A lot of ratings get overblown. I think it's smart to try to sell the in-season tournament rights by themselves.
Yes.
Like,
Mhm.
so it fully feels like it's its own entity. Like, you can't watch these games on TNT or ESPN. Like, it should really go to Apple or Netflix, so it could wholly feels special. Like, oh, like I gotta, and they should provide again that service they're talking about with the bundle of all these sport channels and their sister brother companies getting together is a whole other conversation. But again, it all comes to All-Star Weekend, where they just gather at the midpoint of the season, and they're like, well, we just come here to relax, sell our wares, and then it's on to the playoffs, where business really picks up, because then they dominate the spring, and then they dominate the summer once free agency kicks in.
Yeah, it's gonna be a lot of big decisions coming up for Adam Silver in his tenure. So All Star Weekend did not help, but there were a couple signs of life, like the Steph versus Sabrina contest, and obviously we're going to stick with the NBA, but we're going to turn to this man, Mr. JJ Redick. I don't know why I chose this for you. He's like an owl in headlights or something here, but he looks like he's finding out about this news the same time we are. Um, he was on. Well, first off, he had a whole thing to say about Doc Rivers this week that got picked up because he kind of bashed Doc Rivers, as a lot of people are. And then a day later, he goes on First Take and he talks about how, I could go on my podcast and break down, in the last 9 games that Zion Williamson played for the Pelicans, how much he impacts the game and do real X's and O's stuff. But, that'll get 50,000 views. But then I talk about Doc Rivers and bash him a little bit, and it gets tens of millions of engagements online. And he's unsure of, like, is this just where we are in the culture right now? And he's sort of trying to have this, what's his face? The guy from Network, his Howard Beale moment.
Oh yeah,
Where he's like,
I've
God,
had
I'm
enough,
mad
and I'm
as
not going to
hell, and
take
I'm
it
not going to
anymore.
take it
Yeah,
anymore. He's trying
yeah.
to have that moment, and he got a lot of pushback, and I think rightfully so, because I don't think JJ understands what show he's on. Like, Nick Wright had a great point on Twitter, and I'll now throw it over to you, where he basically said, I don't. I don't go on someone else's show that does exclusively X's and O's and then complain that, we're not having a LeBron Jordan debate. Like, you have to know your lane. Like, you could literally be, especially now more than ever, you could do whatever show you want to do, but don't go on one person's show that does debate and complain, hey guys, why aren't we talking about X's and O's? Like, you don't go into a sushi restaurant and go, guys, why aren't we firing up a barbecue in here? Like, and I think JJ just he's a little. I get his point. I truly do get his point, but I think he's got to understand the lanes that he's in.
I think JJ is right to call out the hypocrisy of X's and O's versus hot takes. Like, Stephen A. Smith, does he have time to cover all he covers? No. They force him to cover football. They force him to cover basketball. They force him to cover boxing and then UFC. When WWE gets its rare appearance on ESPN, they throw him into the mix just so it can get a reaction, even though it's like, this guy probably hasn't watched Raw on a weekly basis in years, or if ever. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It's just he's their front man to put on the big topic issues. Mm-hmm. Versus someone like JJ Redick, who's brought in to do X's and O's talk. So for him to speak out about, we need to talk about the real stuff versus just Twitter engagement stuff, he's right to do that. But what you brought up about Nick Wright, I didn't really pay attention to that. But I think Nick Wright is, and this is what I'll commend people when they acknowledge their own hypocrisy of, Nick Wright knows it's better to talk about, or not better, but it's smarter for him to talk about headline stuff, hot take stuff, than X's and O stuff. And he realizes that's his lane, so he tries to stick to that versus what JJ Redick tries to do. But then what always happens in these arguments is X's and O's still get brought in for hot take stuff, and then hot take stuff still gets brought in to X's and O's talk. It's always eye test versus paper test.
But then, is there a way to square that circle? Like, is it because the thing that resonates most with me about what JJ was talking about is when he says, I could do an X's nose take and that'll get 50,000 views. But then, I give my honest thought. And they just happen to be his thoughts. He wasn't going after Doc because he was like, I'm going to say some bad things about Doc and get engagement. But it's like, he said it, he meant it. And that's the thing that gets the millions of views. So it's like, how do you square that circle? Do you just accept that, okay, I'm going to say some stuff that's going to not the X's nose, but that'll bring people in and hopefully they'll stick around for the X's nose talk?
The way to balance it would probably be like on his own channel, if he himself said, Doc Rivers is a bad coach, here are my reasons, and then I'm going to come back and give you the actual proof with it. Again, like,
right, I'm going to break it down.
Yeah, when you and I cover wrestling, a lot of it's opinion based too. Everyone has their own opinion. Everyone has their own bias. It's different. So when they try to, say someone's a good wrestler versus another good wrestler, or they try to back up who's a draw at this quarter hour, stuff like that, like they try to provide numbers to justify something that is your own eye test. So JJ Redick, having played for Doc Rivers, is able to say, I know this guy is bad at coaching or not that great at coaching because this, and this from my own experience. And then what I see now as an outsider in his new scenario, I can see the same faults versus Stephen A. Smith just seeing Bucks lose 3 out of 7 being like, he's a bad coach. He's the worst coach they've ever hired. We should have known just based off the stats he's given in front of him. But I bet JJ Redick is able to see, here's what happened when we were in Los Angeles. Here's what happened when he then went to Philly. And then here's what's happening now in Milwaukee. And I can give you each example of the center. It's clogged. That's why that's why they're not able to get points in the paint like that. Or, shooters aren't coming off screens like they should. Look how I did. And look how Malik Beasley's doing it. And look how ball dominant Chris Paul is to Damian Lillard. And I think X's and O's still work because when JT O'Sullivan, who does the QB school, did like almost a 2-hour video on Justin Fields being mediocre, he also pointed out that it's not just on Justin Fields, it's on everyone surrounding Justin Fields. Bad offensive line play, receivers not blocking their guys correctly, the tight end doesn't run his route correctly. And then when Justin Fields is about to throw and his mechanics are already off, the whole picture is what's wrong, not just this one guy in particular.
Well, I think that's the big thing with hot take culture that I lament. Like, I'm for having the discussion and these debate shows because that's fun. It's backyard talk, it's barbershop, whatever you want to call it. Like, I think there is a place for that. But I also think there's a place for what JJ is talking about where you do break these things down. And we're seeing a lot more YouTube channels and podcasts fill that space where, like you said, like there could be a whole breakdown video of Justin Fields where it makes you step back and realize, wait a minute, I could listen to this guy over here that's saying, oh, he's just a bad quarterback, or I could get some facts and be like, you know what? These things don't happen in a bubble. That's the thing that I lament the most about the hot take culture, is that even though I do like some of it, it does, I think, lead to an element of people in the audience taking things at face value instead of being like, hey, yeah, this person is a bad quarterback, but maybe he's not the worst quarterback. Maybe I shouldn't be like dunking on him that much because he's still in the NFL. And if you're an NFL caliber quarterback, you got to be pretty good to be one of those. And it's never just you being a bad quarterback. Like you said, a lot of people who are quote unquote bad quarterbacks may have a terrible offensive line, may have terrible receivers. Like, you have to take everything into consideration. Nothing happens in a vacuum.
And that's why I think he's right to point out, because he himself knows his role as a player was a part of the offense, not the entire offense, which I think his argument now is like Zion Williamson. Because I only saw what he said, but he's trying to say like Zion Williamson should be point Zion again. The offense should flow through him.
Right.
That's the best way for him to succeed, and therefore the best way for the team to succeed. Because realistically, how do you want to succeed with your key player out or in? So that means other guys' roles have to get diminished. And he probably knew that, being the star player on his college team, coming into the pros and being the fifth option at times. And I think what needs to happen more often than not is the hot take guys have to have their moment. And that's when you bring in the experts to help facilitate why so-and-so's wrong, why so-and-so's right. And I think he wants to be there for that and not for the argument for argument's sake. I don't think he wants to just yell Doc Rivers is a bad coach. I think if Stephen A. Smith wants to say Doc Rivers is a bad coach, JJ Redick wants to come in and say, let me tell you why he is or isn't. Therefore, it kind of has some merit. So that way, again, it's just not a hot take for hot take's sake. I think that's
right.
the
Well,
whole
I think
landscape.
that's what's irking the other hot take guys.
Yeah.
Is that JJ did
He wants to bring his facts.
He didn't just bring he did get angry and he did give in. Because he was like, if you watch that whole clip, JJ was like, he looked fed up. He was yelling directly into the camera. So it's like, you are kind of feeding into it. He's on ESPN. He knows what's up.
But then he gets to use the argument over the other guys of, I played in these games. I played for this guy. How are you going to, again, you saw it from the TV. You saw it from the other side of the court. I'm on the court when he's not making these adjustments. I'm in the locker room when he's not giving us, the information we need to succeed. So I had said this a few weeks ago, months ago, actually, that like a player of a certain caliber shouldn't commentate on someone above them. Like I had said, Dan Orlovsky should not say Pat Mahomes had a bad game. It's like, Dan Orlovsky, the amount of good games you had, you can count on one hand. So you have to stick with the Zach Wilsons of the world, the bad quarterbacks. You can say like, here's why this guy's not succeeding. Here's why this guy is struggling. And
there's great value to that. I think that's why JJ Redick has been a great asset, because he's not a superstar, but he is a great player. He's been in the league.
And he played with superstars, though. He's able to, like, I know how guys are great because they put in this much effort. He always talks up Chris Paul, and he's like, Chris Paul was doing this, this, and this. And he said, he's a big thing with Luka. He only got to play a few games with Luka, but he sees Luka now. It's like, I saw you in practice and I see, are you not? And Luka's like, I still did the same stuff. And JJ Redick's like, that doesn't make sense to me. How you're able to just play that good all the time when I had to fight and claw for everything. But big on a hot take level of who's better, Luka or Chris Paul, he would probably be like, well, let me bring in the X's and O's, and he would be right to say, because that's a real X's and O discussion. Because at the end of the day, the LeBron Jordan debate's always going to be, yes, LeBron James is a more complete player just due to his size and speed and being multifaceted over the course of 20 years. But then the numbers still show, well, Michael Jordan not just didn't lose in the finals, but he didn't bounce from D Wade and Chris Bosh to Kyrie Irving and Kevin Love. He didn't bounce from then to Anthony Davis, and he stuck with what he had. And granted,
what he had was really good.
No, again, but they kept it together. If LeBron James had decided to stick it with D Wade and Chris Bosh, maybe it'd be viewed as differently. That's a whole, again, hot take argument of itself of who should be rewarded more, the guy who knew what he had was good and stuck with it versus the guy who saw these other opportunities to win these other places and took advantage of it.
Well, you bring up Jordan's Bulls, and that leads us right into our final NBA topic. Is I just saw this morning that Scottie Pippen, Horace Grant, and Luke Longley are going on I guess Luke Longley's the key of this whole thing being in Australia, but they're going on a no bowl tour later this year, where they're going to basically take questions, tell stories about their time on the 90s Bulls, and basically rebuke a lot of claims, I guess, from the Last Dance documentary. Look, I before we even get into this part of it, I think it's fair to say, and they were saying this on Lebitard earlier in the week as well, when this was announced, that I think it's fair that we can look back at the Last Dance documentary and all admit that there was a huge Jordan bias going on in that document. And I felt it at the time. It wasn't like I was blind to it, but some people were, where they took it as a sort of definitive tome of the 90s Bulls. It's like, no, this thing was produced, greenlit by Michael Jordan. You're going to get his lens on things.
Mm-hmm.
And to see what's happened after that with Scottie Pippen specifically, I know Scotty's had some hard stuff going on in his life. I don't know how you reconcile their friendship. This ain't it. This ain't a step in that direction. What do you make of the No Bull tour?
Again, it's just the outcasts are getting together to tell their side. But Dear White People, the great show on Netflix, there was a part of the show once where it was what documentaries are non-propaganda? It was a part of the character's journey. And it's like, yeah, all documentaries are propaganda in a way, like pro or against. And like you just said, the whole point of The Last Dance, why it was made, because Michael Jordan for years had owned his own likeness. No documentary could be made without his approval. No footage of him could be shown without his approval. And he, time after time, shot down these documentaries until this one idea finally reached him, and he realized, like, for my legacy's sake, I'll do this. But what happens is you don't have to sign up for it as well. If you're Scottie Pippen, if you're Horace Grant, again, Luke Longley, they didn't reach out to him, or he turned them down, I think is how it turned out to be, right? He didn't want to take part in it when it came time to interview him. Because if this guy's involved, it might be skewed towards making himself look good. The whole point of the NWA movie was Ice Cube and Dr. Dre made themselves look like geniuses and winners the whole time. And Eazy-E was the one who got fucked over and passed away in the end. It's like the winners get to rewrite history is a common thing.
Yeah. So
for these guys to try to retake what wasn't theirs in the first place being The Last Dance, because the focal point of The Last Dance is the unseen Jordan footage. Bill Simmons had talked about it for years. I've seen this footage, this footage of Jordan that no one's ever seen. It was for a documentary that was supposed to be about the last season that they didn't know what to do with at the end. And he had said, I don't want it coming out anyway. So Jason Ayer smartly is like, what if we tell the whole story of you? And then what if we told the whole story of these 8 other guys? And a lot of the guys didn't like their portrayal, and some of them did. I think they also knew, like, it's Michael's show like it was Michael's show when they were on the team. That's the whole point of the Scott Burrell story, is he demanded something of you, and because he demanded something of himself. And I think for them trying to cash in on the way they were portrayed versus the way they actually are, like I said, like Scottie Pippen's going through a rough time. I think Horace Grant just feels left out because he wasn't on the second 3, because Dennis Rodman took his spot as the third best guy. And then Luke Longley, again, being the ultimate outsider, just not being part of the whole Last Dance process. It just screams like petty in the wrong way versus the way Jordan might seem petty by making himself look so great. Because at the end of the day, we were all going to think Jordan was going to look great regardless.
Well, at the end of the day, they all won.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's the other thing to me, is that, like, okay, yeah, this Jordan guy's a real hard ass, but you all won together. Like, doesn't
and he says
he mean something?
He needs Rodman to win. He said, I need this.
Right. Michael Jordan has said time and time again, I don't win one championship without Scottie Pippen.
Yeah. Again, but what's one? And I had Bill Simmons' book of basketball when he tells the story then about Scottie Pippen passing on the shot because he was, not checking back in.
Why he did that?
Yeah, again, because he thought in his own head like he deserved that moment. But Phil Jackson knew for the team to win, it has to go to Tony. Just like he tells Jordan, who's open, Pax is open. They give him the fucking ball, and they won.
It's just there's a lot of weird hypocrisy to me. Like, Scottie wants it to be his team at that time, but he doesn't like that he's got to give up the shot, which is a lesson Jordan had to learn, but apparently Scottie couldn't. But he wants it to be his team, but then at the All-Star game, he's doing a thing where he's like putting up his Jordan shoe and being like, come on home. And It's like, so what do you
Because
want?
he still knows I need this guy to win like he needed me. Because if he couldn't win by himself, I can't win by myself. Because they're saying this guy's the greatest, and he needed me to come and win.
It's
the Kevin Durant.
All kinds
It's
of
again,
weird.
but no, it's the Kevin Durant thing. Not to create a whole nother, but again, like somehow, some way, and everyone's saying it these days that Warriors' 4th title is astonishing. But you know who looks even worse? Not the Celtics by losing, Kevin Durant by like, damn, these guys won before me. These guys won without me. Yeah. So like, granted, I was an extra piece to beat down LeBron, but it's not like they never went on to win again.
Now it's like, right. It's like now there can be no discussion. There can be no wonder about
versus
it.
me, who I went to join an even better team on paper with Kyrie and James Harden in terms of like where they were at their peak versus where those guys are at their peak. And then
listen, horribly biased, he should have stayed here.
No, he should have. Again, based off the crazy stat of all time is before Kyle Shanahan not winning the game in the 4th quarter, trailing by 7 points, was the Brooklyn Nets being 10-1 when all 3 of them played at the same time, or in the games that they started. Like, imagine one. It was never going to be possible because Kyrie Irving is never going to stay healthy, and James Harden is going to pull his stuff, and Kevin Durant after his Achilles was always going to have bad random injuries, but. Imagine at least 45 plus games. Like, do they go 30-10? Do they go,
Well, and Kevin Durant was like a toenail away from getting to the Eastern Conference Finals, carrying the team on it. Because let's not forget that series with the Bucks. James Harden was hobbled; he could barely play, and Kyrie could barely play that series. So it's like you really had Kevin Durant just taking the whole team on his back. And it's like, it gets me upset. And we just fired Jacques Vaughn, which we need to do, but
what was the negative drawback to that, and it kind of coincides, is that Kevin Durant was dictating that team. Michael Jordan might have been dictating the Bulls, but he still knew, like, at the end of the day, Phil Jackson calls the shots.
Right. Jerry Krause is putting the team together. He could hate Jerry Krause all he wants.
Yeah, but I mean, like, Kevin Durant was like, nope, Steve Nash has to be the coach, even though Steve Nash had never coached a fucking game. And this is on Steve Nash for knowing, like, I shouldn't take this job, but maybe he just Steve Nash
thought, hey, I'm going to ride this thing out. This is a great opportunity.
I think he just was like, if it works out, it works out. If it doesn't, I never coached before, so of course, yeah. So.
God, I remember the morning they announced that he was going to be the new coach and that they had fired Kenny Atkinson, and I was just like, I was literally walking out of a coffee. I literally spilled the coffee over it because I saw it and I dropped my cup because I was like, this is a dumb move.
But you can imagine if Jordan had gotten that mad that Jordan wasn't going to be ridiculous and like, oh, I came back for the last 12 games of the year and then we lose to the Magic. You know what? Phil Jackson's the problem. That's who we should get rid of. Like, yeah. That's why we didn't win. Not the fact that I showed up in the wrong kind of shape, not having played basketball for months, and then, trying to kick my coach to the curb when the other team was the better matchup at the time. And then look what happened. Again, those guys didn't end up winning. The Bulls still won because they kept the right core together. And that's all it is. And these guys being a key part of that Bulls dynasty, I'm not mad at them for trying to capitalize on as much as they can, but at the end of the day, it's just like, I can't take you seriously for your criticism anymore of one guy when this is the lengths you're going to shit on him in any way. Like, it's that level. It's like the Richard Sherman, Russell Wilson thing. Like, you haven't won a Super Bowl without him either. So, I mean, there's something again that's being part. It sucks being part of a team. I know that it's a shitty thing. It's not just everyone wants to shine, but things don't get rewarded equally. No. And at the end of the day, you still know, even if you're aware of it or not, that like I need them as much as they need me. And I think a lot of times what kills the super teams as soon as they start is that, oh, if we don't win, they're going to blame me. And that's every super team's problem since the Heatles. The Heatles were the only team, because at least, sure, they lost the first one, and again we all laughed, and I'm glad that they lost that first one, but then they won two, and it's like, well, then they did it for the right reasons. But then every super team after that could never touch what they did.
No, Kevin Durant. Kevin.
No, again, Kevin Durant joined a self-made super team. Again, it wasn't a team put together by free agency. It was a team put together by scouting. It took them to another level, but the super teams didn't win. James Harden's super teams, I mean, we'll see with the Clippers, but they're not going to win. At the end of the day, they'll still be the Clippers, sadly.
James, Kevin, Kyrie.
You're a real crumb bum.
That's what you are.
Well, yeah, it's just, that's why, again, when you brought me being casual, it's still knowing what happens in the game, but I think just the level of caring it. Again, the guy switching every year doesn't bother me because that's their right. You and I can quit our job tomorrow and go look for a new job. Like, the hypocrisy of that always pisses me off when people are like, they're just looking for a new team as soon as they get to one. Like, well, if you have a shitty job, you want to go look for a new one. But the thing is that these guys have to take accountability when the scenario they pick isn't the scenario that's working out for them.
No. Well, that's enough basketball for today. I think we should cool down a little bit. And by cool down, I mean heat up, because this is...
Yeah, I don't think that's the opposite.
Not a cool life.
No.
KFC is introducing the Chizza, Chizza, quote, it's not pizza, it's Chizza, which sounds like the laziest. They spent all of 5 seconds on that line. What this basically is instead of pizza crust, it's a breaded chicken cutlet. But what it really, really is just chicken parm. So
I was about to say. No, I don't even
framing it as chicken parm.
Yeah, I was just about to say, like, doesn't this food already exist? I don't eat chicken parm. I don't think I've really seen chicken parm up close. So I'm like, one, this already looks like real food. Second, this looks like Stoner's like, I want something cheesy to go with this chicken. What do I got in there? Just sprinkle on some fucking cheese.
Well,
and that way it melts onto it.
KFC are the masters of, we're trying to make stoner food, and then we accidentally just made regular food, because they have this, and then like they sort of kicked the whole thing off 10 years ago at the Double Down, which took everyone by surprise. But the Double Down is a mirage, because again, on its surface, it seems ridiculous, because it's like, we took the bun out and we replaced the bun with fried chicken. It's just 2 pieces of fried chicken.
Yeah, the whole thing is it's chicken with cheese in the middle, right?
Yeah, and like a sauce. They're like, oh, it's gonna be a heart attack nightmare. It's like,
well, it was.
But it's like there's people who walk into KFC and get 2 chicken breasts now. Like, that's not a outrageous thing. It's just they framed it as outrageous.
That's when I had just watched an old Daily Show bit where Jon Stewart had talked about fast food, and a lot of it is like, the crazy ideas they'll come up with, and I mean, popcorn chicken, it's just chicken nuggets, but smaller and rounder, right? Like,
exactly.
Now that I think about it, like as a kid, I'm like, popcorn chicken, it's amazing, but now in hindsight, as an adult, I'm like, it's just chicken nuggets. They turn chicken nuggets even smaller somehow. Like,
yeah, really, you're getting ripped off, if anything.
Yeah. I mean, you're getting more in a box, but again, at the end of the day, like, does it equal six nuggets? You know what I mean? It's like, how many slices of pizza equals one Brooklyn slice of pizza when Domino's got all in on Brooklyn slices? It's like,
oh yeah, or like the you're a few years younger than me, so I don't know if you would remember this, but in the late 90s, Pizza Hut did the big New Yorker. It was like the big New York, and then we had this commercial of a kid like sitting on a haystack in Ohio, being like, my days in New York. You have the folding and the cheese and the folding, and it's like, they wake him up from a dream. And it's like, you don't live in New York. And they're like, you may not live in New York, but you can eat like you're in New York. It's like,
exactly. And that's, again, who's this supposed to appeal to? Again, the people who want pepperoni and cheese on their fried chicken.
You know what? The pepperoni is the most upsetting thing to me for some reason. Like, I don't know, like the cheese and the sauce, that makes sense because I'm used to chicken parm. but like throwing like cured pepperoni on top. I don't know. Somehow it like throws the whole thing off for me.
But like you said, like they realized that she just made a chicken parm. We're like, we can't just do KFC chicken parm.
No,
we gotta we gotta. What's another way? Like, isn't it even triangular? Like the one in the corner kind of looks like it is.
They're just kind of cutting it in a way that makes
yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, begin like when you see the Whopper, it doesn't look like the picture that they show. Like, so
yeah. Oh God, what is this gonna look like when you actually get it? Like, is it just gonna?
Oh, it's gonna look horrible. Like, I haven't had KFC. I think the last time I had KFC might have been with my dad, like 2 years ago. I mean, I eat fried chicken. I just don't go to KFC for fried chicken.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like you're right to say like they wanted to make chicken parm, but they had to add pepperoni, so it didn't seem like they were just doing chicken, because everyone would have been like, again, like me, like, doesn't this exist? But like, no. Instead of pizza, it's chicken.
And you know it's not even going to come in. And you know it's not even going to come in a box. It's going to come in one of those like wax sleeves. It's going to be all.
That's even. I was hoping at least they would put in the plastic container at least, just for some. It feels like it has to almost arrive like that, because otherwise I wouldn't trust it if it doesn't come in the plastic container, like the mashed potatoes or yeah.
How long before this gets just cut up and put into a famous bowl? Like the
See, that's the thing.
Famous
Like they created the famous bowl when they were like, their big idea was, what if everything we sold, we put it together. Mashed potatoes, corn, fried
everything
chicken.
on the table, just push right into a bowl.
And now they're trying to think of like, what if we took pizza and added chicken?
What if pizza but chicken?
Yeah, and I can't think of like anything that's like this ridiculous. I mean, I don't know, fast food's in a weird place. Well, I don't know. I don't get it. I mean, it's like, again, is this what Colonel Sanders, a man from Kentucky, wanted? That
he would have wanted
some Italian influence on his food? Like,
I don't know. He did show up in that Grindhouse movie with Nazis, but
I mean, but again, Enzo Amore was Colonel Sanders. So which Colonel Sanders are we talking about showed up in that movie?
Dolph Ziggler was Colonel Sanders.
Yeah, the Colonel Sanders variants are all over the place. Who was it? George Hamilton?
Norm Macdonald was Colonel Sanders at one point.
Again, like, each Colonel Sanders, I think, signifies something.
He's like the Chinese New Year, like each sign. Like every time we get a new Colonel Sanders, it's like a new age.
Well, weren't they in the baked chicken for a while? Like, what
they
the place
try and
known
make
for
an overture to baked chicken every. Like,
that's like the place known for fried chicken. What if we sell to just?
What if we bake it? What an idea!
Out the skin, you know?
Yeah. Well, you know what? Neither of us are going to KFC anytime soon to figure it out. So
no. Anyone who orders that, I think, the sales on that, I don't think are going to be good. I don't.
But the sales on subscribers to Banks vs. Davis going way up lately. Yeah,
Banks does a great job of cutting out the clips for shorts. I try to help him with what should be cut out as of late, but normally he does the actual legwork, because that's always his thing, is that the production side of stuff. But Banks versus Davis, again, we don't have a set day anymore. It's
usually Sundays, usually sometime on the weekend.
Well, it was always the weekend, and we would try to jump in on a random weekday if something was going on. Sorry about that. But yeah, every week pretty much is what I'll say. Banks versus Davis on YouTube. Banks is often on social media, but you can follow me on Twitter at Davis, aka Drip. I really don't tweet that much, because my whole thing is I always prefer to say stuff on podcasts so you can actually hear my point versus 140 characters of a point.
Yeah.
That was always my thing, going back from Black Wrestling to Banks versus Davis to any pod I'm on. It's just I'd rather say it when the red light's on versus let me type it out, because I'm also not going to type back and forth with people.
Yeah.
All day. That's not.
You don't need
that's
to waste your life doing that.
But I'm shocked when people who I don't think should do it. I'm like, you're so and so. Why are you going back and forth with this person? But yeah, and then on Instagram it's Davis Cole DC. That's much more low key. But thanks for having me on again. I hadn't done Oddball before. I know that. What was the one we had done before? You'd said that at the start. I can't remember. But it wasn't Oddball.
No, I think you've. Maybe you did a wrestle rap. I think you did a wrestle.
I haven't done wrestle rap at all. I've never done wrestle rap.
Really?
Wrestle rap.
Even one that was just with me?
No, I've never done it at all.
May have to change.
And that goes to the Irish Italian beef going on between Emilio Sparks and I guess.
Or as he calls you, who?
And again, he doesn't. That's why I haven't been on. He's like, wait, this again. Why am I going to fight someone that doesn't exist?
It'll happen. It'll happen soon enough. But yeah, Banks.
That's why it was funny when you started the show. I'm just saying when you started out the show because you have the great radio intro, and he comes from that radio background. So I'm always envious of people who have great intros because Banks and I usually just get right into it. So when you start live from the studio, I know I love it too. That's what I've always like. Again, like I don't think I could have done radio, but I love the radio setup at times. Not the whole thing, but I know that's his whole thing is like it's got to be this and that. I couldn't do live every week,
Yeah, but yeah, go check out Davis, aka Drip, wherever you wherever you get your podcast. No, get the Banks vs. Davis podcast wherever you get your podcast. Get this podcast over youtube.com/@Oddball Podcast, over on social media, Instagram @Oddball_pod, and on Twitter/X @Oddball Podcast. I'll be on the personal account, Twitter @MightyVin, Instagram @Vin Forte NYC. Again, if you want to just listen to the pod, go ahead, get it on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts from. You know where to get your podcasts from because you're listening to one right now. My battery is about to die, so I'm going to rush this as quickly as possible. Davis, thank you for taking some time out. Like I said, you're one of my favorite podcasters. And, yeah, I'd love to be on a Banks vs. Davis soon and reciprocate. But with all that said, Davis will not be here next week, but I will be, as I am every week. But stay tuned. I'll be here. Yeah, you're sure.